once we got our, hit the field again and everything, and we got kind of back into a rhythm, then, Cydcor started coming up. And it was kind of bizarre to me because, you get to be your own business owner under the umbrella of Cydcor, which at the time I didn't really think much about it because they made it seem like a good thing because they have the legal backing of Cydcor at your disposal. They kind of positioned it that way. But that was weird to me. That certainly was like, okay, this is kind of weird. Yeah.
Zack, you were a part of Cydcor for a year and a half and eventually made it to ownership. You actually opened up your own office. So I'm sure we have a lot to talk about today because of your experience. But you started on the door-to-door side. Tell us a little bit about that whole thing. First, when did you find out it was door-to-door? What was your reaction to it, and what was your overall feeling toward the door-to-door sales side?
Yeah. So basically I took this position maybe about half a year, maybe a year out of college. And I believe that's kind of the target audience they're going after.
Definitely. Yeah.
So basically they positioned it as, like, when I applied, just account management. There was no cold calling. There was no door-to-door sales. Certainly they didn't mention any of that. But basically, first day I got in the office, we had, those powwows. I've seen some of your other videos. They're exactly what other people have been saying, trying to pump you up for the day. And then basically, we have our meeting and they're like, okay, you're going to pair up with, our sales lead, here, and you're going to go to the field. And I kind of got wide-eyed and I was like, it's my first day. I don't really know anything. Like, oh yeah, you'll handle that training in the field. You'll just shadow them for the day. So we hop in their car, we do hit the field, and I was in St. Louis at the time. And basically we just talked, and they just want to get to know you, make sure it's like light, basically no work talk until we get to the field. And then literally I just stand behind this guy and he's pitching. We used to sell Quill, which was the small business division of Staples. So basically we're just pitching door-to-door office supplies and memberships at that time, kind of like the Amazon Prime of that website. So that was when I was like, oh crap, okay, what am I getting myself into? And then my reaction to that was like, okay, well, this really wasn't what was advertised to me. But I stayed for a year and a half. However, I really had the mentality like, okay, I'll at least just try and give this a year, see where this goes. Because I was hearing some other people in the office trying to sell, and I was like, oh, I can certainly do better than, what I'm hearing for certain people. So I realized that, I'll give it a try, see where it goes, like I said. And that's pretty much what kept me there for the first few weeks. Successfully, I got promoted, within a week, which I thought was badass at the time, but was actually normal because the positions don't really mean anything.
Right.
So then, I got, then I was consistent in the field from there and was a consistent producer. When I first started, I was one of the top producers, but they just make you feel really good. And that's why I think that they made me stick around. They really do a good job of making sure that the stress you hear in the field, like, I've been cursed out so many times from business owners. Basically, when we get back to the office, this was pre-COVID, they just ignore the fact, all the negativity. They just make sure that you're happy and that they'll play ping pong or just talk about whatever. And that's pretty much like the perfect storm where it just makes you forget about your really crappy day. And that's kind of what kept me around after I realized it was door to door. So I realized the people I was surrounding myself with, sales wise and professionally, I thought at the time, was something I wanted and I liked at the time. So that's kind of what kept me around. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said you've realized that this isn't the way it was advertised, but you stayed a year and a half. And I know you said you were just going to try it a little bit. And then you also mentioned essentially what it is psychological and social manipulation. You just had this horrible day of doors being slammed in your face, people cursing you out for doing your job. And now it's kind of like a feel good session at the end of the day.
Yeah.
but what else made you stay? Like what other, I'm assuming that there were manipulation tactics, and we're not even talking about ownership yet, but that whole, staying that whole amount of time, the day-to-day aspect, worst job I could ever think of, probably. But what else was there that made you stay?
Basically, they sold you this vision, I would say, and they were very, very, very good at it too. They say, we're here for the opportunity to own your own business. Like I knew, I like to still think I could own my own business someday, legitly.
Yeah.
But that was really probably the silver lining. What kept me around was they're like, just pay your dues now, just build your team. You can manage your own office wherever you want in the country. And really that was like liquid gold for me. I was like, fantastic. That sounds amazing. And basically my boss at the time is like, you'll make $150,000 after your, first year of being in business, no problem at all. And that's really what kind of kept me around, kept me going through those tough days. Again, the opportunity was what was being sold to us as the sales reps.
The office in which you started, you said St. Louis, was Integra Sales Associates. And if you don't mind me sharing, before we started this recording, you said it was kind of ironic because of the lack of integrity that is in that office. And that's something that I wanted to focus on, because I looked Integra Sales Associates up. They're very, very active on social media, much more active than I would say the average Devil Corp company. And, they're up to, I think about, when I checked, it was about 185 likes on their page, which in Cydcor universe is like the most popular, well-trafficked website or a social media page ever, because most of them have like 20 likes and 15 followers and things like that. During your time in that office, Integra in St. Louis, did you notice any red flags? Like, apart from, like you said, the position wasn't as advertised, but going along on your journey through all the things that you just talked about that kept you there, were there any things, any like pings that were like, that you maybe ignored?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that question up. So basically the first red flag, you mentioned they have a really big social media presence. I actually spearheaded that for them.
Oh,
So
wow.
they didn't have a LinkedIn at the time. I said, you guys have to get on LinkedIn if you guys want to get like better talent here. There was no Facebook. I think they might have had a Facebook, but their website was like pathetic. It had like a homepage and then contact us, and their like job, what we do section was extremely vague and just again, very confusing. So for me, it felt small business. So that's why it's like, right on, let me help. That I came from a small business before, and I wanted to help. And that was my first red flag, was that their social media presence was less than, subpar. The other red flag, actually, the sales leader who did my interview was not there when I started day one. And I assumed that, I was like, oh my gosh, she already got promoted out. She's gone. Like they kind of really kept it hush hush at the time. But she got fired because of other reasons. So that was the other red flag. I realized after like maybe 6 months in the role, they finally told me that she was fired. So that was my other red flag that I kind of overlooked after being sold the opportunity too. So those were the main ones I've encountered. Yeah.
Okay. And going back to the first thing about the website and the social media presence, if you look up their website today, it looks really well structured. It really does not look, I'll say this, it doesn't look as cookie cutter as most of the other websites that these individual Devil Corp companies have. If you know what to look for, there are definitely those things that scream Cydcor, especially if you go to the careers page. There are two pictures, and they're tiny pictures, but one of them is in front of those vision walls that they have at the national conference, and one of them is a bunch of guys holding these, I'm assuming they're new ICL checks. And on their social media too, they have these photos, and if you're looking closely, you can see signs of Cydcor there. Like the checks have Vera Quinn's signature on them, and she's a Cydcor legend. She's celebrated in Cydcor circles and on Cydcor's website. So again, to the casual viewer, this looks very legitimate. It does not look MLM-ish, scamish, pyramid scheme-ish at all. It looks like, well, this is a pretty cool, successful St. Louis-based business. And it seems like they're active in the community. They don't have a lot of followers on Facebook or on LinkedIn, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. You know, a lot of small businesses struggle to do that. So yeah, they do a really good job of selling the appearance.
Absolutely.
Now, you said they sold you this vision.
Yep.
And we're all familiar with the word opportunity. I myself, in regular everyday conversation, I cringe when I say that word, just because it's been forever tarnished by my time in these Devil Corp companies. But eventually you were successful enough to reach all the qualifications to get to ownership.
Yep.
So I do want to ask you the question of, well, okay, once you got to ownership, did the vision and the promise match? But before we get to that, kind of take me through that beginning stage of, okay, I'm about to open my own office. What was the whole process of that? I'm assuming you met with and talked to a lot of the big guns from Cydcor about doing that. You probably went to a national conference or two. What was that like gearing up to open?
Yeah. So actually, this was, COVID was still around. So it was about, late 2020.
Okay.
And so we actually did not have any national conferences.
Okay.
So basically, I had my team, and, we were all finally consistently producing, and I had, some guys that were staying around for some time. And then they basically make it a surprise. So the whole office, surrounded me, and they're like, "You made it to ownership. Congratulations." And, it was a great feeling, and it really was. So that day I actually stayed back from the field, and, I basically talked with my old boss, and he's like, "Okay, so here's the rundown. Here's what's going to happen." And then basically the next steps were, I figured out where I was going to expand to, which was Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
And
was that by choice, or did they tell you had to go there?
That was my choice.
Okay.
I wanted to get, stay close by to family and stuff.
Sure.
So basically from there, I opened a bank account at Bank of America for a business, and he put in about $5,000 at the time, I think it was. And he's like, "Here's your seed money. We're going to get you set up on, all these different platforms for recruiting, for potentially looking for an office." Thank God I didn't sign that, by the way. Anyways, he was just setting me up with all those different tools, and then I basically moved on my own to Kansas City. And lucky enough, I never hired anybody. And it was just because, they kind of just said, "Go, just do your own thing," and kind of left me out there. So I kind of looked at myself in the mirror, and I was like, "Yeah, what the heck are we doing here?" So we were advertising, you're going to be making $55,000. And at the end of the day, if you're a top producer, you're going to be making about half that. So, yeah.
So, okay. So you didn't go far, St. Louis to Kansas City. Was it like 4 hours?
4 hours.
4 hours. Okay. But they didn't send you with a team. They didn't do the whole office rigmarole. Like why do you think your experience was so different?
Yeah. Basically nobody in the office wanted to move. And so my boss was just like, "Yeah, let's just do it anyways, and you can start recruiting as soon as you get to Kansas City." That's how we kind of felt it out. And I guess I forgot to mention to you, my leader, he expanded to Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
He did take a team. Half the team quit when they moved there. And basically he went under over time. And then it was my turn to get out. And so basically I think they had a bad taste in their mouth with that team, and kind of sent me on my own to do my own thing. And ultimately didn't work out. So they didn't necessarily, I'm not the cookie cutter, expansion that happens. So
Yeah, that is really interesting. So you open up this office that they pretty much just took the leash off and you're off and running.
Yep.
So you're going to the field every day. You're the only one that's representing your company. And the reason you didn't hire anybody was just that you weren't open really long enough to hire anybody.
So over COVID, we only had like virtual offices at the time.
Okay.
So I never got a lease or anything that forced me to go into the office. So basically, and I know I'm straying off here, but I moved from door to door Quill to residential Verizon 5G selling home internet. So I didn't have to hit the field until the afternoon. So my mornings were spent recruiting and doing interviews at my apartment, doing Zoom calls. So that's kind of how I recruited. And then, yeah, I would hit the field every day until about, 6 or 7 p.m. and then go back home and rinse and repeat. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So obviously, if this lasted only a couple months, then what you said before about them selling you this vision, this opportunity did not come true.
Correct.
So what happened there?
So basically, yeah, I got my seed money. I was super excited. I moved to Kansas City and I got here. And then I'm basically like, oh, this is ownership. Okay. So I'm still hitting the field every day. I didn't have a team to move with me, which is, I know, kind of a one-off. But basically I was like, yeah, this is not the dream. If this is what they kind of, if this is that opportunity we were sold, then I don't want it. So that's basically when I realized, yeah, I'm not happy. I'm not making it. Well, I made some money, but I'm not making any good money. Like, it's just, that's when I kind of had the aha moment. And then I called my boss when I was in the field one day and I was like, yeah, I'm done. And I put my 2 weeks in and my boss said, no, you can just leave the field. You're done. So I'm like, really? That's after all we've been through, that's how this is going to play out. And yeah, it was just bizarre and a bad time because I was just not happy. And then he kind of just, gut punched me at the end there where I couldn't make any money in between when I was looking for a new job. So, yeah, that was my experience from quitting and putting my 2 weeks in.
I'm curious why he didn't try to offer you more support, because I mean, you're his outside deal. So I'm really curious as to why he didn't try to 5-step you into staying or anything. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do.
Okay.
Basically, at the time, I was at one deal out of like 3 happening because he was trying to expand as quickly as possible. So like I said, the Kentucky one from my leader was not doing very well at all. So he was certainly taking some time from my boss. I might have been put on the back burner and he was still trying to run his office in St. Louis with somebody coming up the ranks about to expand to Tennessee as well. And I just think there was too much going on for one, myself to be supported. And I was really the only one on that campaign at the time, besides one other guy. So nobody else was trained how to sell Verizon. They were still selling Quill. So I think that might have been, part of that issue too.
When you first got promoted, did you have any conversations with like either your owner's promoting owner or like any of the higher ups in Cydcor voicing your concerns about what was happening?
I did. And basically they just said, just stick to the grind, keep recruiting. It's going to happen soon. Just keep doing what you're doing. And they said, you're free to visit our offices anytime. But I was like, I'm not making a 12-hour trek out there if I'm not making money. So yeah, basically, that was kind of a dead end conversation for me whenever I did reach out. And I was like, yeah, you're just kind of telling me what you're thinking I need to hear. But yeah, that definitely didn't help. But I did reach out to those folks, my boss's promoting owner. Yeah.
So when did you find out about the entity that is Cydcor and what their relationship was to you and your owner?
That had to be probably, I would say, well, 6 months at least. And they didn't really tell me in, a few months before that. But again, it was kind of a weird time. I started January 2020 and then COVID hit. And then we hit the field again in the summertime. Um, so once we got our, they hit the field again and everything, and we got kind of back into a rhythm, then, Cydcor started coming up. And it was kind of bizarre to me because, you get to be your own business owner under the umbrella of Cydcor, which at the time I didn't really think much about it because they made it seem like a good thing because they have the legal backing of Cydcor at your disposal. They kind of positioned it that way. But that was weird to me. That certainly was like, okay, this is kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah. In 4 years of doing this, I still don't have an answer to how you can own your own business yet be under somebody else and they can shut you down at any time.
Yeah.
I mean, technically you owned your own business. So if you wanted to work 2 more weeks to make a little bit of money, you should have had every right to. There shouldn't have been someone else to tell you, nope, just go, but
right. That's kind of
proof.
where it got a little complicated because I was still under the payroll of Integra at the time. So he had kind of the right to tell me, like, I guess, no, can't do 2 weeks. Because again, he was just so caught up. I think at least he was so caught up with all the expansions and things happening where it was just easier for me to still be on his payroll at the time.
Yeah, and it's not really good for him when you say that he was so caught up in everything else, because on the website he's president, but he also calls himself the chief visionary officer, whatever the hell that means. I mean, that's the most bogus title I've ever heard before.
That's new.
But that's new.
Yeah.
So maybe he was able to improve not being able to handle 3 offices to become a visionary officer. I don't know, whatever. But one of the good things, I guess, if you could say that came out of this whole experience was that you met the woman you're currently dating through this. So, I mean, how did that work? And looking back on it, do you feel like the Cydcor social environment almost required relationships within the work dynamic?
It almost does because, we spend so much time working and we would get to the office. We had meetings as early as 6:20, 6:30 in the morning. So I'd be waking up at like 5. So you're forced to spend so much time with this close knit group of people, where, it certainly does foster, those relationships, because what you guys are going through. It's hard to explain if somebody's outside of the industry, obviously. Most owners, obviously, I think I've seen in your other videos, do end up dating the recruiters because, again, they spend so much time, running the business. And I think that does breed, you kind of have to form relationships within that circle unless you already have a relationship from, outside beforehand.
You said you both quit once you realized what was actually going on. So it seems like it was fairly easy for you to talk her into leaving once the whole ownership thing happened.
Basically, she actually was the one that wanted to quit before me. She ended up visiting that outside deal in Kentucky and realized, like, oh my gosh, this is not good. Like, if this is ownership, like, I want nothing to do with it. And that was like right before I was moving to Kansas City. So, she already expressed her concerns to me. And I was like, again, let me just see what I can do. We'll make it work. And then, I realized too, I was like, yep, this ownership thing is not what it was chalked up to be. So then, she quit, I think a week or 2 before I did. And then, I try to put my 2 weeks in, like I said. And then,
Yeah.
I think that probably was why he didn't want me to do 2 weeks, because he knew obviously we were dating.
Now, one of the things you talked about in your message is the concept of people leaving Cydcor in debt. And like many people know, Cydcor is 100% commission based. So if you're not selling and getting those installations, depending on what you're selling,
Right.
you make nothing, right? And like you mentioned, you knew some people who were making $50 a week. Yeah, that sounds about right for Cydcor. It's primarily free labor. And earlier you mentioned that you were very grateful that you never signed an office lease because you know of new owners who left in a lot of debt, like more debt than I even have, and I have over 6 years of student loans. So, and you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but what are some of those examples that you know of people that were sold this vision, like you said, this opportunity, but ended up leaving in so much worse straits than when they came in?
So again, that deal in Kentucky, that was my leader. He did get an office, and basically he signed that lease, and he ended up closing his doors. And I know he got a family inheritance from what I've been hearing. He had like a plot of land somewhere in Missouri. He had to sell it to pay off that debt. And I was like, really? So that is one of the examples that I know of with Kentucky. The other one was that Tennessee deal I think I mentioned to you. And basically, he was actually one of my leaders under me, and he signed a lease with another Cydcor office that was already there. They were splitting that lease. And basically, about a month or two in of his opening, he also quit. So I think I forgot the amount, but it was certainly over $30,000 for that lease. Um, and the other Cydcor office, my understanding too, sued him for that amount. So that's where that came from. And again, he was one of my top producers, but again, I mean, he's certainly not making it. He might be making $30,000 a year, maybe. But he quit and was in that debt. So I think that was just an eye opener for me. But those are the main two examples that I know of. So,
do you know what that debt entails? Because that can't just be an office lease for a year. Like what was signed away when those offices were opened?
what was signed away? Well, my understanding from that situation was it was just a lease, and basically that other Cydcor office didn't want to pay the remainder of the lease like by themselves because it was an expensive office.
I would say, yeah. If that's how much it is, that's wow.
Yeah, it was something along those lines. But I think that was just he might have been able to get out of that lease like legally, but then he got sued from that other Cydcor office just to pay that some amount, So that's my understanding. Yeah.
In any of the calls that you had prepping you for ownership, and I know you said you're kind of a unique case, so you can, if you know this from other people, you can bring that in too. But were there any conference calls or Zoom meetings about how much owning your own office costs? Because in the opportunity meetings, they make it sound so easy, and they usually, at least the opportunity meetings I remember, is that they go through all these things you need, which they make it seem like is so much cheaper than legitimately starting your own business. And then at the end of everything, they circle this huge number, and that's what you take home. But anyone who's reached ownership knows that's not true at all. It's a blatant lie. So were there any ever conversations about like all that cost that you need to open your own office?
There was, and
Okay.
again, it was just a unique time because it was the COVID time.
Yeah.
So they said you can save so much money by not having an office. You can just do virtual offices by Zoom. And then basically, they just run you through all like the recruiting tools you need to invest in. You need to have a recruiter at some point soon. But basically, with my switch to residential, like I had all that time in the morning now because I was used to getting up at 5 in the morning. I was my own recruiter, and then I hit the field. So they really focused on saving as much money as possible at that time. But I did have actual calls with like a way higher up for sure. And he did go over like, you should look for leases, you know, in this range. If you have this many heads in your office, you know, and then obviously they still made it seem extremely profitable, like you said. But those were really the only conversations I had. Again, I was kind of just let go, and after all those meetings, and yeah, that was kind of my experience.
So you've obviously made it farther in Cydcor than most anyone I talk to, but it's something that I ask most of the people that I interview is, if this video reaches somebody who either doesn't know a lot about these companies, might not even know why this video came across their feed, you know, what are some things to look for? What are some questions to ask? And then also separately, for someone who does get involved and maybe gets about as far along as you did, what other things can they pay attention to? What kind of questions can they ask?
Whew, that's a good question. I think when I first started and interviewed with them, I was like, "Hey, is this cold calling?" And they blatantly said, "No, this is not cold calling." So they might still blatantly lie for that question. I would continue to. I asked for benefits too when I first started. And I was like, that's weird. There's no benefits. Let's see where this goes again." So ask for benefits. If you're not going to get any benefits, steer clear, man. You know, that's just a big no for me, at least these days. I would ask what upward mobility looks like. And if it's like you get promoted within a week or two, that's kind of a red flag. That was important for me as well, because I want to have a career, obviously. But they just made it seem like that opportunity again. So if they're selling like the opportunity, I would just try and ask to clarify that, I guess, as well. Or yeah, what outside deals, if you want to go down the Cydcor route, what outside deals have worked and why have they worked? If you want to do that. So I that's kind of tough though, because they always just blatantly lie to you.
Yeah.
No, I wish I could answer that question better, but yeah, I would just say look out for 100% commission, look out for no benefits, because that's the big telltale, you know. When I had to file my taxes for this year, Alex, I owed $1,500 still for my business I opened. For whatever reason, you know, closing it down and still paying my dues, it was still about $1,500 out of my pocket after I quit about a year later. They don't withhold any taxes on your paycheck when you're 100% commission like that. So even if you're only making that like $20,000 a year, like if you're doing well, you still come out of pocket like $1,200 taxes wise.
At least, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Like I did not realize that they screw you over for taxes. So that was my, you know, my tax talk there. I wanted to mention when I was interviewing there too, they made it very clear that there was no nepotism in the office. And as soon as they realized I was going to be sticking around for a little bit, being like a sales leader, behind closed doors, they'd be like, "Oh, there's certainly nepotism here." My boss even said that, like, if you're going to be putting in the work and as top salesperson, I'm going to favor you for sure. So I just want to make that absolutely clear. There is nepotism in Cydcor offices. You know, I got my promotion probably for senior lead or whatever the hell they called it at the time. They pretty much told us not to talk to our parents or friends about what we do because they wouldn't understand what we do. They wouldn't understand the opportunity. They would only, you know, be negative to what we have, what we're striving to be, right? So they basically said, don't reach out to anybody outside because they actually see what we are. If you tell your friends what we do, you know, they're going to see that we're obviously just a commission pyramid scheme or multi-level marketing scheme, whatever you want to call it. So basically they said, just cut off all communication with your friends and family, which is crazy to hear myself say that now.
That's unbelievable. I mean, that there's nothing, it sounds like they're not even trying to hide it anymore at this point. That's amazing. Yeah, that screams cult. There's no reason any legitimate business should tell you to do that. It's one thing to not tell them about what you do, which is in itself ridiculous, but it's another thing to say, just don't talk to these people. Your support system means nothing anymore. It's all us now. Come to us, spend time with us.
Your support system now. That's what they pitched. Yeah. So yeah, I think that was worth mentioning for sure. When I sold office supplies in St. Louis, I put 60,000 miles on my car. So that was insane. We weren't comped for gas, obviously. And that was just another really, just looking back on, I was like, what the hell was I doing? Yeah. So I guess the other reason I kind of stuck around too, I forgot to mention, basically, if you ever have like those thoughts of quitting, everybody does in the field every day. Whenever I would reach out to my boss or, my other promoting bosses or whatever, they're like, yeah, you just have to have the mentality. It's like, if you don't have what it takes, then, those guys quit, but you have what it takes. And as an outside salesperson and in my own personality, like that works for me, unfortunately. I'm like, well, damn, I have what it takes. You kidding me? Yeah. Let me get back in the field and make some sales. So look out for that too, I would say. That's certainly what they ingrained in your brain, for those, it's obviously a high turnover job. So there's like, yeah, they're just not like up to our standards for what it takes. When I sold residential door to door for Verizon, home G, 5G, basically I would call on those big apartment complexes in the Kansas City area. And, I had the cops calling me like probably 5 times. Yeah. And, there's really nothing I can do about it. I would call Joe, my boss, and just be like, yeah, they're calling the police on me. He's like, oh, it's fine. Just go to a different apartment complex. And I'm like, that doesn't seem right.
No.
This is bizarre. So anyways, that was just stressful for me. And another eye opener. I was like, yep, this is not that. That was another reason I was like, yeah, I'm done. I should not have that happen just to make money. Like that's my job. So
no, there's nothing normal about that. No, there's no job, that legitimate job, that should require you to say, yeah, I had the cops called on me a couple times today, or I've talked to people who either have been or knew someone who was arrested, and it's like, oh, that's just part of the job. No, it's not part of a job. This is a scam. Yeah, and you're right about the psychological manipulation too, of saying, well, they quit because they weren't tough enough or they didn't have it. If you have a competitive streak in you, if you're a proud person, that definitely hits you hard, because you don't want to be one of those other people. You want to be the top 0.001% that makes it and is successful. So they're very good at that. They're very good at that. They are emotional manipulation.
They really are. And I fell for it.